Hello guys, and welcome back to Parkitect, where because of recent events I don't really have that much to do in this video. I don't want to start on a new section of the park, but the Japanese section is almost done. The only thing that I still had to do over here is finish this little plaza with its building, and then it's pretty much finished. So there are a couple things that I wanted to do in this video and why this feels a bit like an oddball to me. First and foremost, most of this video is actually ended up being going back to different parts of the park and sort of refurbish them, tweak them a little bit, because this is now Alpha 3. Pretty sure this is actually the first Alpha 3 video that I'm releasing, and there's lots of awesome new stuff to play around with, and while I'm not the kind of person to actually show it off, there's definitely kinds of things that I haven't placed in a park yet because I couldn't or I didn't know about them yet, that I definitely want to get back to and actually put in there. So that's something which I'll spend a lot of time on. Which means that the time-lapse is going to be roughly 13 minutes, a little bit more, which I didn't feel was quite enough yet, so I hopefully can make it up a little bit with a real-time section at the end, sort of giving a small overview of it, but I know that doesn't really do it anyway, so I'll try to do my best for the next video to actually get a good start of the new area, more about which I'll talk about in the real-time section. Now, to actually talk about what I'm doing here, I want to finish this plaza with a building and a Ferris wheel just to neatly wrap up the Japanese area, and actually make use of a trick which somebody taught me on Steam, and for the life of me I can't remember who it was. So if you're watching this, I am so sorry. I'll get back to this when I actually find it again, but Steam doesn't have any chat logs and I haven't been able to actually find back who actually said it. But it's basically a small trick which is quite easy to do, which I'll do later on in this video as well, to get some actual ground shrubbery in a sense that you can't really do otherwise. Basically, the person told me on Steam that if you place a tree and then terraform afterwards, you can just terraform without moving the trees. So effectively, if you terraform to make a small pit, then place a tree inside of that and raise the land up again to make it flat, you actually have a tree that's sunken into the ground, and you can actually make some bushes. And with like a slight sort of slope on the terraforming, you can actually kind of define where, at what height that tree is going to sit. So you can do all sorts of shrubbery things with that, which you can't really do otherwise. So that's actually a very neat little trick, which can be a bit annoying to use, but you can make a lot of good use of it. And definitely in this Japanese area, where I did want to feature a bit of Japanese-esque gardening around this big temple-like building, it came in pretty handy. So about the building itself, it is a very, very simple building, just a sort of standard Japanese temple building. I'm not the biggest, most knowledgeable person about this, so I'll just address it as it is. It is basically a food court that pretends to be a Japanese temple. That's quite a bit fancier than maybe it should have been, but it's just a food court like many other food courts that you see in Parkitect. A path leading into it, a few stalls inside, and a bit of services, benches, litter bins, that kind of stuff. And it's all nicely hidden within a building. And yeah, it's actually quite simple that way. A lot of it also kind of comes down to what I've done in the rest of the area so far. It basically just builds on everything I've built in all the other buildings, which I also have to say, this really feels like a very good point to end the Japanese area from a gameplay perspective as well, because this is kind of like that point where you've already sort of done everything you can do in the theme, and new buildings don't really become so much more like new buildings, but they're more like another one that you've already made. So in that sense, this really felt like a good way to end it all. This building doesn't really bring any new kind of scenery ideas, it's just a variation on the Japanese building so far, but it was fun to play around with and make little food courts and actually dress it up a bit more like a Japanese garden on the outside. I'm not sure if I actually talked about this before, I probably have. But the idea behind these bushes is many Japanese gardens are quite different from European gardens in that they feel a lot more natural. Like, Japanese gardens often have topiaries and bushes in all sorts of shapes as well, much like European gardens, but where European gardens are appear very man-made, they've got all sorts of very unnatural shapes and positions and a lot of symmetry going on, things like that. Japanese gardens seem a lot more natural, they kind of have a flowy thing to it, And that's why I was really happy with that trick to lower trees into the ground, because the bushes that you get in the game are quite small, but Japanese gardens often have these very large, round, flowy bushes, and this is at least one step closer to kind of getting that sort of idea. Now the rest of this video is all about working on the rest of the park, and the first thing that I wanted to do is connect the monorail because it wasn't connected yet. But one bigger issue that I should talk about with the benefit of hindsight is it still doesn't have any other station, and I really need to add another station. And this is quite awkward, but I have to admit that I completely forgot about the fact that I need to add stations to this thing. And well, realistically, I definitely want to have a station in the Japanese area. We'll see how that's gonna go, because I'm not sure if there's really any space left for another station. But at the moment, I just wanted to connect the monorail, not leave it so empty anymore. And I'll figure out about this station at some point in the future. Right now, it's just one big loop that doesn't really do anything otherwise. Placing that tree actually just quickly made me realize that I was still in pause mode, which wasn't really great for placing down trees, and I think actually the time-lapse looks a little bit more interesting as well in unpaused mode. So unpaused it there for a bit, and added that very small, I think it's a vending no, it's a little store something, I'm pretty sure. In any case, I figured I could fill that space with a small store, which would be more fun than just leaving it open or making it more forest, which is quite a bit boring. And the next thing that I wanted to do is work on the main street. Now the main street was built in a version of Alpha 1 development build and didn't really have that much yet. This was like built right after this stony path was put into the game. So it's quite old, and since that time many new objects have come out. And I just wanted to revisit this thing. Obviously, I have also gotten a few more tricks and gotten a bit better at the game as well, and I just wanted to revisit the main street a little bit. It is, at this point, quite iconic for the park though, so I didn't want to touch it too much. But there were just some areas that felt a bit too empty, and some things which could definitely just be improved and given some extra detail, given the new objects that we have. One quite relevant piece is the new cornerstone, which is supposed to be used for like an industrial-esque theme, I'm pretty sure, but actually came in quite handy with the different themes in the park so far, and so far I've just been using door pieces as cornerstones, and this does work a little bit better. So I figured I would go with some actual cornerstones. Some of the windows could have used some more cornices, or what's the word? Awnings, that's it. Some of the windows still could use some more awnings, so I added a few of those. There's lots of planter stuff all around it as well. I am pretty sure that at the time when I built this, or when I got back to this, it was possible to build planters, but you couldn't yet raise them. The game still saw them as regular plants and you couldn't raise them, much like fences. Hence why the main street uses some paths to actually raise fences and only has planters on the ground level, so I wanted to get back and use some of the planters as window boxes, which seemed quite fitting, figuring the Alpine theme, and many Alpine buildings do have that quirk of having window boxes. And in general, just adding more foliage to the very densely built places just kind of makes them a bit more charming, a bit more blending into the natural environment, so I wanted to do that quite a bit. And one other thing, heavily inspired by Shy Guy's Alpine Village in Roller Coaster Tycoon 3, some of these Alpine chimneys, which I thought would be a little bit nicer than just the standard chimneys in the game, made out of the big haunted house chimneys with a very white color, and using the new industrial pipes to give the tops of chimneys, you can actually make some pretty nice custom chimneys. I think at this point I have been able to use more chimneys as any kind of object that is not a chimney, and use any kind of object that is not a chimney to make chimneys out of, than vice versa, which is quite funny, but it actually works out pretty well, so I figured I would do that for a little bit. And some of the rest over here is a bit of foliage. I'm not entirely sure what I'm gonna do with this area though. I'll talk about the theme a bit more in the future, but the way that it's gonna be laid out, I have no clue yet, and that's why after placing those couple of trees there, I pretty much moved on to some things that I still wanted to do as well. One of which is adding a bit more detail to the station here. Shape-wise, I was always quite happy with this station, but it just doesn't have that much to look at. and just wanted to add some extra detail to it. Some of the parts just seemed very gritty, very standard, not very interesting to look at, so I wanted to add some extra detail to that. And this part over here didn't really have as many path elements as it could have, so I wanted to add quite a few of those as well. Really, if you sort of just have a very empty area and you're not really sure what to do with it, I always think it can work out quite well to just add all sorts of planters and benches and lights and litter bins to it until there's barely any space left. It might be a bit of an overkill at some points, but it's always better than having a path that's completely empty, especially with a park that is already quite dense, as this one is, and quite busy as well. I figured I could go for some extra path elements here and there. Especially the planter pieces work quite well in that regard. You can just kinda plop them down next to benches and next to lights to make them come alive a little bit more. They don't really occupy too much space, and I would want to be careful with where you place them. Like, the guests always kind of walk in the middle of a tile, so the sides of the tile are pretty much safe. But getting planters anywhere too close to the middle of the tile can be dangerous at some points, because you might get guests walking through it. But pretty much most, if not all of these, should be more or less safe, and shouldn't have people go straight through it. Now this restaurant-ish building over here, I'm pretty sure it does have a restaurant inside. Didn't have any kind of sign, and while I can't really add any letters to it, I thought it would be nice to add at least some kind of small sign. The rest of this is very similar to the Alpine area, just adding a bit more detail in some ways that I couldn't before, especially the cornerstones. Came in quite handy over here, since many of the Mediterranean buildings thought it would fit in quite nicely with. But yeah, I didn't really have access to any of those cornerstones up until this point. And then there's the very big mountain of buildings which the log flume goes through, which I pretty much built, and after that didn't really look at again, which could still use a little bit more detail to it. Not 100% sure what all of these details are supposed to be, and some of them are a bit overkill as well perhaps, but it's always interesting to look at, especially since I do figure making a park in an isometric game like this, even if you would look at it 3D, it has a very minimalistic sort of roller coaster tycoon style to it. It is very different from making a realistic theme park, so I'm not too worried about making all of these extra details in here. Now, in the middle of those buildings, I just wanted to quickly place a tree, which might seem a bit weird, but I wanted to get a tree in there rather than just a simple sort of backstage roof, because I wanted to avoid the backstage real theme park roofs, just to keep this, well, also more appealing from the isometric perspective. So that's why I quickly wanted to place that in there. Anyway, that's it for the time-lapse. I'll give it over to my real-time self. That's amazing. I wasn't able to recreate this earlier, but apparently by placing trees in paused mode, you can actually cause trees around it to fall over. So I placed a tree over here, and it suddenly did this. It's pretty cool to be able to recreate it though. I wonder actually how long that shockwave will go on. But basically you just go to normal mode and they should... Yeah, it's taking a while, but there they go. That's pretty cool. Though, it might be a bit better to wait until that glitch is not in the game anymore. Also, one thing that I should say, I've gotten quite a few comments about this queue line over here, which didn't actually hook up before, and now that's hooked up, so that's great. I love how much attention I can put to any kind of detail around the park, and yet miss little things like that. I really need my viewers to look at stuff like that. But yeah, just a very quick overview of what we have at the moment. We've got the Sugoi Desu Japanese area over here, which is more or less finished right now. I don't think I can actually go into this area too much. There should be plenty of room to expand into another area over here. And this is pretty much Japan right now, with its pagoda, a nice little station. Well, I say little, but it's pretty sizable. A pretty sizable station for the inverted coaster, which pretty much is the big sort of drawing weenie of the Japanese part of the park. And along the side of that, we have one very big, winding, wide path with all sorts of rides and restaurants and basically everything that's important to this area around it. And that's the very basic build-up of this area. There's some of the smaller things which I've added alongside pretty much every part of the park. Some smaller details, little fancy spires and pointy bits on buildings, which are new in Alpha 3. So, actually no, they were new in Alpha 2, but I never added them. Which were new in Alpha 2, but I never added them, so I wanted to add them alongside many parts of the park. And cornerstones are new in Alpha 3, so many of the sort of amateur-ish cornerstones that I had on many buildings of the park, the way that I built them using door pieces like that, have been replaced with regular cornerstones. This station's also got a bit more detail to it. There's more planters and all sorts of little elements on many of the buildings in the park. And the main street has gotten a bit more detail and shape to it to fit in more with the rest of the park. And yeah, that's basically everything. Now, next time I hope to head into this section, and it's probably going to be the Western theme, since it just seems to be the best fitting style, and the style that's most doable in this game, even though I still have to figure out how exactly I'm gonna do it. So, yeah, I'll try to figure out how I'm gonna do that, and leave you guys at that. Hope to see you guys next time, and thanks for watching.